Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalamu rasulullah. So welcome to We Are Okay Wednesday, and today's topic is Q is for Quarrelsome, when the need to be right overshadows the need for peace. And we're really focusing here on our personal relationships, particularly where that happens. Covering, the ego versus the understanding, and how most arguments are not about truth, but about the need to be heard and validated. And, the winning at what cost, holding on to conflict, stealing away peace and damaging relationships sometimes letting go can be the real victory. And from quarreling to connection, when we pause, reflect, and approach differences with humility, we can open the door to real understanding and harmony. SubhanAllah. So one of the things that we talk about at Back to the Fitra is about, being in our wisdom and then not being in our wisdom. And when we approach matters with people, if we are in our wisdom, we can come from our heart. And even if we have to have a tough conversation with them about something, it will come across with compassion and without judgment. And then there is a chance that in return they will respond from the heart as well. However, if we begin a conversation, even if we are completely right, when we're not in our wisdom, we're going to be coming at it from a place of ego. And then what usually ensues from that is what we call battle of the egos. And I think, given that it's Ramadan and it's a time for us to self-reflect, I think today we're going to approach this topic not from the perspective of someone else being quarrelsome, but from the perspective when we are becoming quarrelsome. I'm not saying that very well. Quarrelsome. And what's going on and why. So the first clue in the first point, which was ego versus understanding, how most arguments are not about truth, but about the need to be heard and validated. I think a step before that is the concept that we call separate realities, which is understanding that everybody on this earth has their own unique perspective. And so even if we have witnessed exactly the same thing, we will each have our own unique perspective of it. Now, when we describe our perspective, it may be similar to other people's perspectives, but it won't be exactly the same. What they're seeing in their head won't be the same as what we're seeing in our head. And as much as we use words to try and describe what we see in our head, those words are deficient, and those words will also land for the other person and be understood by the other person and interpreted by them in their own way, through their own way of thinking. So when we start to understand that, we can understand why it can get very messy, because we can witness the same thing and have a completely different reality about it. We may not even be close. And quite often in those situations, because it is our reality, it looks real. It looks true. We hold on to it because it's our truth. And when the other person doesn't agree with us, this feels very problematic. And it's as if we have to convince them of our reality, of the way we see it. And so we're holding on to this idea of, but this is how it happened. This is what happened. This is what was said. This is what they did. It's all our own reality and our own truth. And yes, because it's our reality, it looks real. And by holding on to that, and then the other person themselves may also be holding on to their truth and their reality of the situation, which could be equally as valid, by the way, the conversation goes nowhere. It just becomes a quarrel, an argument. And most of the time in those situations, we're not even hearing what the other person says. The whole time they're talking, we're trying to figure out how we're going to reply, how we're going to respond, how we're going to convince them, how we're going to be right, how we're going to win this argument. And so it isn't communication. It isn't helpful. It's not resolving anything. It's filled with a lot of hot, angry feelings, a lot of resentment, and it can definitely be at a cost of damaging the relationships. So there's nothing to be won going down this path of I'm right and I have to get my point across. And even if you are actually right, it's still not helping. It's still not helping because it's stealing away your own peace and is potentially damaging relationships. So how do we navigate that? Especially, when we're very determined that what we are seeing is the reality, the truth. The solution is when you understand what I just explained to you about separate realities, when you realize that there could be a completely different perspective to our own from the other person. And it stops being about being right, but about embracing the fact that my truth is my truth and their truth is their truth. And that it's not necessarily about I'm right, you're wrong. That to a degree, in some situations, maybe everybody is right. And maybe there doesn't need to be an argument about it. There is a picture, I wonder if I can bring it up, that makes a really good point of that. And I'll share my screen. Let me just see if I can find it really quickly. If I can, we can look at it. If I can't, I'll just keep going. But it really sums up, like a picture paints 1,000 words. As I said, as I was describing this topic, was that the best we can do is when we're speaking to someone to share with them what we see is to use words, right? But that words are deficient and they'll land with somebody however they land with them. And potentially it could be in that what the picture they build in their mind based on our words really may not look like what it is we actually said, which is the really fascinating thing about separate realities. And being able to be fascinated about it can lead to curiosity, and curiosity can lead to solutions, actually. I'm not going to be able to find the graphic, actually. It's a graphic where you've got two people standing looking down at a number. And from one of theirs perspective, it's a letter 6. And from the other one's perspective, it's a letter 9, not letter number, letter 6, number 6 and number 9. So they're both actually right. But you would never convince them of being wrong because from their perspective, they are actually right. And it's a great example of what I am talking about. So we have a choice. We have a choice in these situations. And the choice is to become curious about the other person's reality or to stay determined to present our own. And I think Aisha's bringing the picture up for us. There we go. I'll bring it up and share my screen so we can see it on the big screen. There we go. This is the picture I was referring to. Jazakallah khair, Aisha. So you see, both are right. And this is the thing that I think we forget. And the reason we get caught up in being quarrelsome, in fighting for our perspective, is that maybe we are right. But us being right doesn't make the other person wrong. And so when we make that choice and we choose to be curious about the other perspective, then opportunity opens up. Opportunity opens up for us to hear their words. Because usually when we're being quarrelsome, we're not hearing their words. As I was saying at the beginning, we're not hearing what they're saying. We're just thinking about how we're going to convince them of our reality. So when we stop needing to do that and we come to them with curiosity to understand their reality. So they might even say something pretty horrible, right? It might not become, because when people are angry, the impulse control tends to get overshadowed, and things will come out of people's mouths that isn't the nicest way of approaching things. And so they might be saying things to you that you know are not true from your perspective. They might be coming across in a very ugly manner. And if you're able to not take it personally because you understand that it's a separate reality, and if you can not take it personally by thinking, well, the way they're interacting with me right now is displeasing to Allah, so they really need to answer to Allah for that and not have to take them to task for how they're talking to you, and can come from a place of curiosity. It opens the way to say something along the lines of, so I'm curious why you think I'm this, or why you think I did that, or I'm curious to understand why you're feeling so angry about this. In fact, I can't tell you what the words are that you'll say or that will be the right thing to say in the moment, because they'll come to you in the moment. I'm just using those as some examples. And when we ask a question from curiosity like that, without judgment, because the questions can come across very judgmental. So if we're still in our own anger, it'll come across like, so what do you think about that? Why are you thinking about it that way? And it'll come across judgmental. Probably not like that. That was a bit over exaggerated. It won't come from that compassionate place. So it'll still be coming from ego, and it's not going to work. So I just thought I'd better put that in there in case you go and put it into practice and come back and go, it doesn't work, right? But when it truly comes from the heart, there's an opportunity for that person to stop pushing back against you. Because before being curious, everybody was in I, right? Me, 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 me. But now you've stopped being about me and now you're being about them. That changes it completely. And amazing things can happen because we can come to understand that, in fact, their reality was valid. We could come to understand that they're quite delusional and their reality is mad. But we don't have to take it personally, and everything can come back to a state of peace, because at the end of the day, really, as human beings, what we're seeking is peace, isn't it? Because it's peace is where we find true contentment. We're not really chasing happiness. We're really wanting peace. So for the sake of Allah, we rise above it and ask with curiosity. And from that curiosity is the opportunity for connection and an opportunity to understand where the other person is coming from. And then an opportunity, even if you don't agree with their perspective, for them to feel heard, and then for them to actually be capable of listening to you. And so you don't have to be quarrelsome, and you don't have to force your point on them. From you being curious, in return, they can respond with curiosity too. Now, it doesn't always work out magically, beautifully like that, but at least we can stand before Allah and say, oh, Allah, you know, I did my best in this situation. I didn't provoke the situation more. I wasn't coming from my ego. I put you, as in Allah, first. And I did my best to find a way to have us back on track, reconnected, not for there not to be angst between us. Because at the end of the day, as the saying says, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. We don't go into it with an expectation that it will resolve everything. We go into it because this is more pleasing to Allah than quarreling with somebody, because it's not getting anywhere. It's ruining relationships and ruining our sense of peace. And when we don't have a sense of peace, it steals away from our worship, our good deeds, our intentions become muddied by all the chaos that's going on in our mind around it. And so, of course, we're harming ourselves and our ability to be there, to live life with ihsan for the sake of Allah. So we do it actually for ourselves, not for them. If we see the gain or the for ourselves in doing that, if we see the loss for ourselves if we don't, we have more chance of being able to turn our quarrelsome behavior around and not become quarrelsome, inshallah. So I want to open it up for questions. Feel free to come on the mic or type in the chat any questions you might have. If you don't have a question, I'd love for you to share a takeaway, something that you found helpful or interesting, something that you can either type that in the chat or come on the mic as well. But I'd love to hear from you now. What did you find from this talk about being quarrelsome? No questions? It was very straightforward, was it? I have something here in the chat. Who spends in the cause of Allah during ease and hardship, and who restrain anger, and who pardon the people, and Allah loves the doers of good. Yes, it's a really, really good deed. Alhamdulillah, being able to do this. Aisha, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah, it was a much needed session, subhanallah. Especially in Ramadan, I noticed that so many things just surface up, and everyone is fasting, everyone is just trying to take care of each other. But somehow something happens that little conversations turn into arguments. And that moment in the presence, being present in that moment and being in the wisdom, realizing that not every conversation doesn't has to end as an argument or anything. Listening to this session, I'm realizing how rewarding it is. And the first thing that when I was listening to you, this ayah came to me. The impact is very different. Even though I've read this with translation many times, but what you are saying, it's making so much sense, that how pleasing it is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to
Mm,
not be angry and
mm,
forgive people, because this is something that is not very easy for human beings, given the situation that we have ego, we have nafs, we have thinking, we have waswasas and all. Then subhanallah, that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, you let go and just let me handle it. So being present in the moment and asking for help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is what is required. And
mhm.
yes, like the picture you mentioned, 6 and 9, the fact always remains there, that there is a separate reality no matter what.
Yep.
Subhanallah.
And
Subhanallah.
that is the key point, because when we get preoccupied with the idea that they they must be wrong because everything looks clearly right to us,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
then our focus becomes on persuading them to
Mm,
see our reality. But there's always a really big chance that it's beyond them to see our reality, because they've got such commitment to their own reality.
true.
It doesn't
True.
matter what we say or do, they won't see it. So it's, I don't like this saying, but they say it's like flogging a dead horse. The horse is dead now, it's not going to move.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
And that it's really seeing the truth of that allows us to just allow people to have their own realities and be okay with that. And even if they're not okay with our reality, we're confident and comfortable in our own reality.
Yes. Subhanallah. And it's not a denial of our reality, but it's just the projection of their own reality.
Hmm.
And that was the biggest blind spot for me, I would say, that I'm somebody who would over explain and keep on going and going and going to the
And then
point.
wondering why they're not getting it, because
Oh,
everything you're saying, the words, see, when we communicate, I mean, there is body language as well, but let's just
mm,
focus on the words, because we're trying to paint a picture using words. But your words, before they become a picture in the other person's brain, has to go through all of their filters.
mm,
And so the words, when they get to the other person, may look very different to the words you sent. And so there's absolutely no chance of you
mm.
actually recreating the picture that's in your mind in their mind.
True,
And
true.
so when we really understand that that's pointless, we stop bothering trying to do it.
Mm. Subhanallah, subhanallah.
And then what's so fascinating, I find, is, and not all the time, but a lot more of the time, that when we don't have to be right, and when we're happy to accept that we can have different opinions, opportunity then naturally opens up to have a
Subhanallah.
conversation where both people walk away enriched by the other person's perspective.
True,
Not
subhanallah.
necessarily with the other person's perspective, enriched by the other person's perspective.
Mm,
And that's different.
mm. And how beautiful that can be in every relationship.
Yeah.
Relationship. And another thing that stood out for me, what you just said, that it's not necessary that they would accept our perspective and we have to accept their perspective. It's just that we understand that they have their own thinking and mind and perspective, and we have ours.
Yeah. So we don't have to understand and respect their perspective. we have to understand and respect that they have a perspective.
Mm.
And so we don't need to get to the bottom of it. We just need to go, you know what? I get it. You see it differently.
Subhanallah.
So freeing.
So freeing and powerful. And
Mm.
powerful. Alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah khairan.
Wayaki sis, and Jazakallah khair for coming on the mic and sharing with me. We have a few more minutes if somebody else would like to share something that they took from this discussion. I have this fly that is annoying me. And or if you've got a takeaway you'd like to share. Oh, actually, it's not a fly. It looks like it's a wasp. I won't swat it then. I don't really want to be stung today. I have my door open because it's nice and fresh air, but I'm letting in all the creatures. So no one has a question or a takeaway. I'd love to hear one or two takeaways. Who's game to come on the mic and share? We're a bit quiet. That's okay. Well, I do hope that you did get a takeaway from the session today. And we will be pausing the sessions now next week because it's the last 10 nights, and the week after because it will be, I guess, people still in Eid mode. And so we will meet again the week after that, inshallah. So we've done P, N, M, O, P, Q, R. We're up to R. I can't recall off the top of my head what emotion is connected to the letter R, but we will definitely post it before the session, inshallah, and we'll go through that together. Resentful, it could be, yeah, something like that. Sounds about right. So on that note, everybody, I wish you all the best of the rest of Ramadan. Treat it like you have this most precious gift in your hands and don't let it slip away or be lost. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all your good works and make them weigh heavily on your scale on the Day of Judgment. I look forward to meeting you again after our pause for a couple of weeks. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.